Hey guys, Happy New Year and welcome back to school, I guess. That sounded a lot better before I hit the record button. The bad news is we have to get back to the business of taking notes and tests and showering every day and getting dressed every day, but I'm getting off track. The good news is that for the most part the rest of these units are going to be a little more interesting and a little bit easier than all the work that, or most of the work that we did before break. So welcome to Unit 8, Human Heredity. Mostly human heredity. We're going to talk about some other things. Here are 5 major subjects that we're going to cover, topics that we're going to cover in Unit 8. And they are pedigrees, genetic disorders, karyotypes, non-Mendelian inheritance, and chromosomal mutations. And this can all be found in sections 12.2 and 12.3 in your book, and you will see some good examples in there, so I would definitely use that to your advantage. So the first topic we'll talk about, and this is a pretty good chunk of the test, are pedigrees, and maybe you've seen something like this before. Pretty simple. A pedigree just shows inheritance of a trait, and that could be anything. It could be a genetic disorder, it could be something as simple as hair color or something like that. But usually it's a little more into it than that. They don't show genotype, however, as we'll show in class. We'll do these in class. You can often determine genotype just based on looking at the phenotypes that are given in the pedigree. So what you're looking at here are, at the very top are a husband and wife. You can see they're represented by a horizontal line between them, and then a line drops down from their horizontal line to represent their children. So they had 2 boys and 2 girls, and one of their girls got married, or at least had offspring here. So a line down from them, and they had 2 kids, a brother and a sister. So important to recognize in these pedigrees a few things. One, lines between symbols represent mating, having offspring, and lines above connecting represent brother and sister, like these here on the right. The symbols themselves are pretty simple. The squares are for males and the circles are for females. And for both cases, when they are empty, not shaded in, that represents an individual that does not have the trait in the pedigree, and that, again, that trait could be basically anything. Whereas the shaded in symbols represent individuals that have the trait that is being tracked in the pedigree. So just quickly jot those down. Open or not shaded in, male without the trait. This one's male with the trait, female without the trait, female with the trait. And we'll go over some of these in class too, to give you an idea of the practice that you need to have for this. And you can see here I've given you a few extra slides that we're not going to do right now. We're going to do all these practice problems in class. So we're going to get on to genetic disorders, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about a lot of the details that go into these, because hopefully you guys will do a better job of that yourselves. And so basically we're going to talk about, just really quickly, a definition of a genetic disorder. It could be inherited or not, but basically it's a condition, an illness, sometimes a handicap that is usually comes at birth, but it can also sometimes be seen not until an individual is an adult. There are 2 common types of genetic disorders. They are autosomal and sex-linked. Just really quick to classify these. Autosomal means it's a disorder found on one of the chromosomes that are not the sex chromosomes. Again, you have 23 pairs of chromosomes. The 23rd pair are the sex chromosomes, X and X for girls, X and Y for boys. 1 through 22 are the autosomes. So something really quick you want to jot down, just so you know, autosomes or autosomal refers to genetic disorders that occur on the first 22 chromosomes, any of the first 22 chromosomes. Sex-linked refers to only the sex chromosomes. And for each one of these, there are different classifications. You could have autosomal dominant and also autosomal recessive. Same dominant and recessive that we saw in Mendel's genetics. Same thing for sex-linked. You could have sex-linked dominant or sex-linked recessive. And you can also have classifications between the sex chromosomes X and Y. And typically you see X-linked, just the letter X, X-linked, or Y-linked. meaning only found on the Y chromosome, and there's not too many genes found on the Y chromosome, so there's not too many things ever that could go wrong with the Y chromosome, but it is possible, and you'll see that too. Alright, so make sure that you know kind of the differences between them, and similarities too, and we'll cover these, we'll see these as we go through them. First one we'll talk about is the codominant blood disorder, and we'll talk about codominance in class in just a few days, but it's a codominant blood disorder found mostly in people of African descent, which leads to abnormally shaped red blood cells, and that's one of these right here. So a nice big drawing or picture of it. But then you can also notice it just under a microscope. I mean, this could be a microscope that we have in school. You can see some of them are a little bit longer and thinner. They're not the nice round kind of donut shape that they should be. And this is called sickle cell anemia. And I'm going to go through these one at a time on each side, but you have an answer slide basically with 1 through 13. I'm going to give you guys a quiz on all these, and so basically a good way to quiz yourself is to separate question from answer. So write this down on the slide that has blanks 1 through 13, sickle cell anemia. And so the major problem with sickle cell anemia, just really quick, is that these blood cells, since they're not nice and round and they're a little bit more rigid too, they don't fit so nicely through the bloodstream, and obviously bad things can happen when you have clogs in your bloodstream, strokes and heart attacks and really nasty things like that. Second genetic disorder is actually currently incurable. It's autosomal recessive, and it involves excess mucus production, usually in the lungs, which causes respiratory and sometimes digestive failure. And this is called cystic fibrosis. I'm sure this is something you've heard of before, as was probably the last one. But here it gives you an example of two pictures. Here's a normal airway, and here's one with cystic fibrosis, and you can see that thick mucus that builds up. Mucus is a great home for bacterial infections. If you've ever heard of or had a sinus infection, you know what that's all about. Basically, mucus is warm and moist, and that's what bacteria love, so they can grow in there and cause infections. And obviously bacteria infections are bad, especially when you're talking about things like your lungs and tubes leaning in and out of your lungs. The third one is common in people of Jewish descent. This is a recessive disorder caused by the lack of a fat digesting enzyme, which kind of sounds weird, but a buildup of fat in the wrong places is not good for your body, especially when it's cases like this where it could be in vital organs. There is no cure, and death is common by age 5, and so this is a pretty nasty one. This is called Tay-Sachs. Should be a hyphen between there, but you might be wondering about this one and the first one, sickle cell anemia, how they know basically descent, Jewish descent or African descent. It's kind of an interesting part of the genetic disorders, and the current technology is that they're kind of narrowing down where these disorders kind of took place and what groups of people, because hundreds of years ago people were geographically isolated, culturally isolated. There were language barriers, so certain groups of people just did not mate with each other because of those reasons, and so they can track a lot of these things way back, sometimes thousands of years. It's kind of interesting stuff. A fourth one is also an enzyme disorder, and in this case they lack an enzyme necessary to break down one amino acid into another amino acid. And this one's not really too big of a deal. It can actually be dealt with pretty easily just through diet and some medicine, but basically it's just a buildup of this enzyme phenylalanine could be bad in the bloodstream. Okay, blocks certain proteins that are necessary for transport in and out of the bloodstream. And this one's called phenylketonuria, but we can just abbreviate it with a PKU. And the picture you see is a newborn getting tested for it. Basically, they just take a blood draw. The fifth one, also called monosomy X, and monosomy meaning one, so it's simply a genetic disorder that involves having only one X chromosome. Some of the characteristics you can see there: short stature, broad chest and stuff, a webbed neck, which is kind of interesting to see a picture of, but all I have here for you is a picture of the swelling, and this is called Turner syndrome, also referred to as XO, meaning there is no other sex chromosome, and this is only for girls. Y chromosome makes you a male, so if you don't have a Y chromosome and only have an X, you are a female that has this disorder. The sixth genetic disorder is X-linked recessive and is characterized by a rapid progression of muscle degeneration, meaning the muscles don't form, and even the ones that do form sort of start to lose their function quickly. And you've probably heard of this one, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. This one's pretty common actually, and you can see there can be seen in young people and old people too. And this poor little guy's got special training that he's got to go through just to kind of learn how to walk or try to walk. The seventh one here is pretty much unaffects people, and it's not really a big deal. It's just an extra X chromosome in a human female, so also known as triple X syndrome. And again, a lot of these disorders involving the sex chromosomes, people are infertile. In this case, they're not. Genetic disorder number 8 is another X-linked recessive vision trait. And you're all looking at the picture, probably already guessing what this one is. It's common in 8% of males and almost unheard of in females. Because it's X-linked, we'll see this in some Punnett squares that we'll do. This is red-green color blindness. The pictures here on the left, the two apples up on top are normal. So a normal person with normal vision, and a red-green color blindness person would see those same apples pretty much just like that. It's kind of like a yellowish. A person without red-green color blindness can look at this image right here and see the number 42 inside. A person with red-green color blindness cannot see those numbers. It's just a blur. It's just kind of all like I think like a grayish brown. Number 9, actually something that we've already kind of talked about. It's an extra chromosome number 21, and this is called Down syndrome, also known as trisomy 21. Tri meaning 3, so you have 3 chromosome 21s when you should only have 2. And again, probably something you've heard of before, and maybe even have seen or know someone with this. Number 10 is also a product of nondisjunction, as was the last one, in which the chromosomes don't separate correctly. And in this case, there's an extra Y chromosome. And so obviously it's a Y chromosome, so it's a male. And they are almost fertile. They're nearly normal fertile males, but that extra Y chromosome can cause some problems. And a lot of people don't know they have this. A lot of guys don't know they have this until they try to reproduce. And so you can see here in this picture of chromosomes, you can see there at the bottom is 2 Y chromosomes. So for Down syndrome, same thing, just 3 chromosome 21s would be almost the same picture, except for 3 Y chromosomes, or sorry, instead of 2 Y chromosomes, 3 sex chromosomes, you just have 3 chromosome 21s. This is called Jacob syndrome, also known as XYY. Number 11 is an extra X chromosome. So instead of an extra Y chromosome, there's an extra X chromosome. Causes some feminine features, slowly degenerating testes and enlarged breasts. And this is called Klinefelter syndrome, and actually this one's kind of, relatively common. All these just genetic disorders are pretty rare, but in terms of disorders, this one's actually kind of common. Number 12, sorry if you're a woozy blood person, I hope you're not losing your lunch right now. This is a recessive X-linked disorder characterized by delayed clotting of the blood, and you probably have heard of this one before. Hemophilia. And something to recognize for this is it just doesn't affect like cuts and scrapes, but also bruises and even joints. Sometimes joints can bleed and cause a lot of really nasty swelling. Number 13, this is a neurodegenerative disorder of people basically usually between the ages of 30 and 40, and it's autosomal dominant. It's called Huntington's disease.